I love lilac. Growing up, we had a giant lilac bush in my front yard, large enough to block the road completely from view in summer. Man, I love that smell. The seasons are changing. Fall has come and summer is ending. The flowers in my garden are all drooping and dying. But you know where all the flowers are still blooming? Always Minecraft. I thought it would be fun to look at the types of flowers in Minecraft and see how close they are in design to their real-world counterparts. At least it'll give me an opportunity to spend time in a place where the flowers are still blooming. So the first flower that comes to mind when I think of Minecraft is the Dandelion. And looking at them, I have a tough time with these quote-unquote flowers. And I'm using air quotes there because, honestly, in the real world, they're weeds. Like, big, bad, will destroy your lawn and your neighbor's lawn in one summer kind of weeds. In Minecraft, they're sort of a generic yellow flower, but in my yard, they are devil incarnate. I have spent years and many hundreds of dollars fighting against these little fluffy invaders. They are the penultimate bane of my existence, next to Bermuda grass. Design-wise, there isn't much similarity between the flower in Minecraft and its real-world counterpart. Dandelions start out as a fan of leaves at the bottom, and then they put out one small little yellow flower right at the base. And once they've been pollinated, then they shoot out this long stalk with a puff at the end that contains dozens of the seeds, and that's what we think of as the dandelion. And those seeds are, especially designed to float on the wind and directly into my flower beds. The game flower, however, it looks more like how a child would draw a flower. It's got one main flower stalk, one yellow bloom at the top, and side leaves at the bottom. I would give this a C rank. It looks like a flower, and it's a yellow flower, but it's not really close to the original in any meaningful way. Peony. Now, peony is one of my favorite flowers. I'm impressed at how well Minecraft represents this because you see it as a giant bush with a huge fluffy blooms, even in the blocky form. Sure, they aren't able to represent the overall roundness of a peony flower, but the bush is 2 blocks tall in the game, and the color of the flowers is spot on. This might be my bias talking, but I would put this squarely in the A tier. The flower is represented realistically as a tall bush, and if you squint, the petals almost look fluffy. Rank A. Sunflower. The sunflowers I grew this year in my garden came in 3 flavors, so to speak. The largest of them was about 10 inches across and 10 feet tall, and definitely looks like the sunflowers in Minecraft. Mine don't actually follow the sun like the ones in game though, which is kind of a bummer. I thought that was a trait of the flowers, and so I paid attention during the summer, but in my garden they just stand there looking like a cross between a person and a plant, pretty much ignoring the location of the sun altogether. Rank S tier. Orchids. Orchids are fascinating flowers. How many plants do you know that thrive by attaching themselves to the sides of trees? In the dark. When comparing the Minecraft orchid to real life, the biggest difference is honestly their color. While they grow on the ground in the game, they do look like the real life counterparts, but there's no such thing as a blue orchid out in the wild. In the stores, those blue ones are always dyed. And while they sure are pretty, they're about as realistic as those created by Mojang. Rank-wise, I would give these about a B. They look like real orchids, but they don't grow on trees like actual orchids do, and they certainly aren't colored realistically. Tulips. The tulips come in several colors in Minecraft. just as they do in real life. They are the quintessential springtime flower in my mind, sprouting up right at the beginning of the season and then they vanish when it gets too warm. Because these are solitary plants, they grow in a single stalk from one bulb, and I'd say Mojang did a great job of representing them, both in the variety of the color and their growing habit. I have nothing bad to say about the Minecraft version of the Tulip S tier. Poppy. Because Mojang is a European company, I have to assume that their version of the poppy is based on the Icelandic or European poppy, a bright red flower with flat white petals. The poppy replaced the rose of years ago, RIP to my little rose friend, and honestly, it's a much more realistic flower compared to the one it replaced. The poppies in Minecraft grow on single stalks, and just like out in the wild. So we're good there, and they are prolific, something you also see with the little red flowers scattered all over the Minecraft biomes. I would give the poppy an A rank. It isn't so close to say that this is super faithful as a representation of the original, but anyone who's seen the Icelandic poppy would tell that the game version is a decent copy. Yeah, A tier. Allium. Alliums refer to a lot of flowers and a big group of actual vegetables. If you've ever eaten an onion, some garlic, or one of those giant leeks, you've eaten an allium. Alliums as a flower are all giant, tall puffballs on stalks, and they can put out flowers the size of your head. Minecraft takes a more diminutive approach with these impressive onion cousins. Their alliums are similar to those I put in my front yard, thinking that they would be big, and then realizing once they bloomed that they were tiny, puny little things. That's not to say that Minecraft alliums aren't cute, because they're adorable. It's just that I wish they had some of that massive scale of the sunflowers that the game has. Imagine these huge, impressive, basketball-sized flowers towering over your head, Alice in Wonderland style. Now that would be S tier. But ranking the alliums as they are, I'd probably give these guys plenty of points for realism, but I can't give them top marks because when they're just so small, they're not impressive. A tier. Oxide Daisy. Being someone who hasn't lived in Europe for long, I don't know much about the Oxide Daisy, but it reminds me of a yellow-centered black-eyed Susan, a daisy that has a bushing habit and often is planted in gardens, around in my home state where I grew up. Those in Minecraft are rather distinctive, but appear as single stalks rather than bushes, which, as you can tell, I don't really count as a natural growing habit for many of the flowers on this list. In Minecraft, these flowers are larger than in real life, with broad, flat heads, white petals, and yellow centers. Because their size is actually surprisingly larger than their natural counterparts, and because these are shown in solitary stalks rather than in groups or bushes, I would give the Oxide Daisy, the Minecraft version, a B tier rank. Cornflower. Okay, honesty time. I had to look these up because I've never seen them at a gardening store or in the wild. My whole life I've read stories about people with cornflower blue eyes, but I'd never actually seen the flower personally. These little beauties look like baby carnations, but are, as the idiom implies, a deep blue color. In my research, I found that the cornflower tends to grow in groups that branch off of one stem, in a cluster that isn't represented in Minecraft. They actually depict the flower as growing alone on a single stalk, which is, I think, a missed opportunity for realism. I would give this a B tier rank because the color and the shape, they're good. It's just the growing habit that's different from expect a realistic flower. Lily of the Valley. I have limited experience with Lily of the Valley. Around certain religious holidays, I saw people in France buying bunches in the springtime, but they aren't the sort of flower you would normally find growing in the west coast of the US, you know? That being said, the Minecraft version is pretty darn accurate in its representation, since it's these little bell-shaped blooms that are surrounded by wide, almost triangular leaves. They're also very small in-game, which is just how they are in real life too. I would give this game version of an iconic flower an A rank. Lilac. I love lilac. Growing up, we had a giant lilac bush in my front yard, large enough to block the road completely from view in summer. Man, I love that smell. In fact, I just planted one in my backyard. I can't wait for it to bloom next spring. I have to say, this is another case where Mojang did a great job representing the actual plant. The flowers on the bush are spiky, just like the original, and the color is a pinkish, purplish color, very close to an original lilac tone. Rank, probably an A tier. They don't have the giant scale. If I were creating a game version of a lilac bush, it would be much bigger. But they definitely represent the real-world counterpart well. Rose bush. You already know how frustrated I am with the roses in Minecraft. I felt certain that there had to be an original Swedish rose Notch was inspired by when he put the flower in the game. Boy, was I off the mark. Turns out it's just a rose, but this modern updated version grows in a more realistic fashion at least. There are thousands of types of roses, and red roses are by far the most iconic. The shrub roses look closest to the Minecraft one, with flowers jutting out from a central bush. I think, next to the sunflower, this is actually the most realistic flower model in the game. It's not as if you have roses growing up on single stalks alone out in the fields and forests of Europe. S tier. Azure Bluet. Well, aren't these just the cutest little flowers? You know how I've been railing on about the growing habits of flowers and how unrealistic they are in Minecraft? Well, these ones are represented in Minecraft just how they are in real life. I mean, down to the small mounds of teeny tiny flowers and grouping habit. The color is spot on, the size is nigh identical, and they get extra points for that realistic bunching that they do. These are ranked an S tier. A note about wither roses. These don't make the Minecraft ranking because although they are flowers, and yes, they are in Minecraft, they don't grow out in the wild. They're instead dropped by that super scary monster I hope never to meet because I am a wimp. Even though they aren't on the list, I will say that for a completely unrealistic flower, they do look like what happens after I bring home a bouquet of roses and forget to put them in water. Points for realism, I guess? There's my tier list of the very important ranking of flowers from a 10-year-old game. Other plants. If you're out there, and I know you are, what ranking would you give for the fidelity of the Minecraft flowers? I think overall Mojang has done a great job. I just wish some of these flowers had more realistic growing habits. Wouldn't it be awesome if the tulips drooped after they spawned? And I would love to see some of the flowers that naturally have groups in the wild growing a habit that's closer to spawning a little more naturally. Maybe they'll have a flower forest update. Oh, one can only hope.